Hey, yo, everybody. Zack here with RevZilla, and welcome to another episode of Daily Rider. Our guest today is a BMW R nineT. That is approximately a 1200cc oil-cooled twin-cylinder engine, some lovely green paint, and an MSRP of just about $20,000. If you're not familiar with the nineT concept that debuted a little more than 10 years ago now, BMW basically took its standard Boxer flagship engine that was state-of-the-art in about 2012, and it built this sort of retro-cool spare motorcycle. And in doing so, it gave itself a little pat on the back for all of its heritage, of course, and it provided customers with a classically styled, simple motorcycle. So all that begs a couple questions, I think, not least of which, does it work? Does it feel cool and old? What are the good things that you get with a bike like this, and what are the bad things that you get? Well, I think with the ride to work, we ought to be able to get to the bottom of it, huh? Let's go!
All right, everybody, before we get going on the Daily Rider for this R nineT, just a quick reminder that this video is brought to you by the YouTube channel that you're watching, RevZilla. RevZilla is an e-commerce company where you can buy things for you and your motorcycle, or you can buy things for other people who like motorcycles. And a little bit of that money you spend at RevZilla goes into making content like this. So the next time you need something for you or your bike, please consider RevZilla. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching. Okie dokie. We'll start with the engine on this R nineT, which is the 1170cc Boxer twin, which is basically from BMW's 2012 and before, kind of. It is called a Boxer because the engine is set like this and the pistons go like this, pop, 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 pop. Sometimes called a flat twin. And yeah, it's pretty basic BMW architecture. This engine's now a couple generations old, and one of the ways you can tell is that the intakes come in the back and go out the front. One of the signatures of the new water-cooled Boxers is that the intake comes in the top and goes out the bottom. So that's a dead giveaway that you're looking at an oil-cooled BMW twin, or air-cooled if you go back far enough. Other than that, pretty standard issue stuff. You got a steel trellis frame. You got standard upside down fork, 46 mil, I think, if memory serves, not that it really matters. You got Brembo calipers, braided lines, nice braking equipment, though the rotors for the 2024 bike, maybe 2021 and on, I forget, 10 mil smaller than the original nineT. Basically, very nice braking equipment, which is nice. Out back, you've got a drive shaft and a paralever suspension system, which is very much a BMW thing, and works pretty well in this application, I think, as we will talk about. Contrast cut cast wheels, which are kind of snazzy. I think they look pretty cool. And then aluminum gas tank. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but it's lovely green paint with exposed aluminum. It's quite nice, in my opinion. Let's see what else. The original R nineT came out in 2014, I believe, and that bike has evolved over the years. I think there was an update in 2018, 17, 18, something like that, and another one in 2021, and now this one in 2024, which is arguably one of the bigger ones because it now gets the R12 nomenclature before the nineT name. That's in part because it now has a fraternal twin, the base R12, which is more of a cruiser, and there are some remnants in the nineT version, such as a slightly more rake on the front end here, and there's a longer wheelbase in part because of that. There's a longer swing arm, I think, since 2014 anyway. There's slightly less horsepower because of updated regulations for emissions and the like. Let's see what else. I think the headlight's a little bit fancier. It's got cruise control now, but yeah. So there's really small evolutions over the course of the past 10 years, but a lot of the references that I make to the original bike or the first bike or the previous bike will be the sort of original one from about 10 years ago. Okay, I think we're ready, everybody, right? Not much else here, just handlebars and a seat. So let's use them. It is a fob system, so you hit a little power button here, and the dash will wake up. And then we'll fire up this oil-cooled twin here. Oh, there's the pipe. Kind of cool sound. I think it could be a little louder, which is rare. I don't usually say that, but whatever. We'll talk more about that as we ride, everybody. This is the upgraded Headlight Pro. So you can see it's got a little LED daytime runner here, and then down here you'll see these little sets of mirrors. So when you lean over to one side, it illuminates and projects the beam that away. I think it's opposite side to opposite side. It's technically adaptive. It throws a little extra light when you lean over. I don't think it works particularly well, to be honest, but it's something, and it's not even very expensive for what it's worth. Okay, let's hit the road, shall we? I think I'm ready. All right, let's talk about some specs on the old R12 nineT. We have a very brief, nope, not it. We don't even have a red light there. Just talk about seat height, which is, I believe, 31.3 inches. Pretty reasonable seat height. Maybe with this red light we'll be able to experiment with it for a moment. It has a 4.2 gallon tank, and when that tank was full on the Daily Rider scales, it weighed in at 490 pounds, I believe. There's the old bend in my leg at the light. Pretty reasonable seat height, I think, quite approachable. So that's nice. As for horsepowers, I believe they claim 109 horsepower from this engine now, and some amount of torque that I don't remember, but it'll be in the description of this video. And yeah, them's the specs. Nothing really outlandish, you know, not a particularly high or low seat height, not a particularly high or low horsepower number, and not a particularly high or low fuel tank capacity. Though I would like to point out that I think the OG nineT had a 4.8 gallon tank, and this one's down to 4.2, which, if I had my way, I would have just kept a bigger tank, because I think that's handy. Oop, vent was open. My bad. We're back on track, everybody, don't worry. As for what it feels like to sit on, it is quite neutral. At 6'2", for me, the seat height feels a little low. The pegs are not particularly high, but the seat being so approachable, as I put it earlier, means that legroom is, I don't know, not cramped, but certainly the least comfortable aspect of the bike. The upper body riding position is great. It's very upright, and the bar is quite wide. It's very commanding and yet comfortable. I think it's quite a nice place to sit. I might experiment myself with a taller, thicker seat, because thicker is often better when it comes to seats, and it would give me a little bit more legroom as a taller fuzzy bear. I actually got a surprising number of questions on social media about whether or not this bike could work as a touring bike. Basically, like, can you take a light tour? Can you go on a 3-hour ride? Can you go on a weekend trip? Stuff like that. Yeah, is the short answer. Definitely. The engine is sort of originally was a touring engine, and so it's quite smooth, I think, on the freeway in situations like this. A little bit less so when you start going 70, 80 miles an hour, which of course is less comfortable from a wind protection standpoint, being a naked bike and quite an upright one. But also I could stand to have some taller gears. I kind of wish 5th and 6th had a little bit wider spacing and were more like overdrive gears, because I feel like that would speak to the personality of the bike a little bit, and it would make it better for those light tours or weekend rides or whatever you like. Basically, there's a bit of DNA built into almost every motorcycle. A lot of brands, especially European brands, really tend to have this. Ducati, for example, they just make sport bikes. They can't help it. Like, they built a cruiser in the Diavel, but if you ride it, it's pretty flippin' sporty. So on and so forth across the brands, they have sort of an identity. BMW's is touring. And so even when BMW makes full-on sport bikes, they kind of can't help themselves. Like, the seats are always like a little more comfortable than they need to be. They have heated grips when they don't need to, stuff like that. The nineT certainly falls into the BMW DNA silo of the BMW brand, in that it's supposed to look kind of like Spartan and raw and simple, but ultimately at its core, it does feel a little bit luxurious and comfortable for what it is. For something a little bit more anecdotal, I'll tell you that in my experience and sort of like long stints burning through a whole tank of gas on the highway on this bike, I found I actually like the way that it feels, except for the riding position, which, because there's no wind protection and you're so upright, and your feet are underneath your thighs, the foot pegs are maybe just a little farther forward than you expect them to be, which I think makes for a really lovely riding position in almost any scenario. But on the highway, getting hit with wind in the chest, I found myself using the passenger pegs, which makes the leg room worse, but it sort of pivoted my sit bones to the right position, and I could lean into the wind a little bit easier, and that made the seat feel a little bit more comfortable. So it's not exactly made for long days of freeway travel, but like I said, at its core, I think it kind of can't help it. Now, the same people who are asking about light touring and weekend trips are probably going to be curious about fuel mileage and range. I can tell you that my low number was about 35 and my high number was about 42. So with a 4.2 gallon tank, it's like decent range, right? But I was surprised how early the fuel light comes on. I think the reserve is set for 9/10 of a gallon or a gallon or something like that, as they often are. So it'd be right around 100 miles sometimes that reserve comes on. You have quite a bit farther to go, but since there's no fuel gauge, you're going to have to learn exactly what the range is and how comfortable you are pushing it. So considering what the bike is, I get why the tank capacity is not a huge priority, but I can't help but wish that it just had a 5-gallon tank or 5.2 gallon tank, because I think that the bike would support that both visually and kind of like culturally or practically, I guess. Last thing I suppose we could say on the freeway is the mirrors, which aren't really notable for anything except they're smoother than you might expect. And of course they're the wrong shape. I mean, how the heck am I supposed to know that I'm riding a heritage retro classic cool guy bike if my mirrors are all trapezoidal and not round? It's insanity. I mean, come on, BMW. Off we go into the neighborhood section of the ride and the round town challenge. This is a place that I really enjoy riding the nineT. I think it's quite good at these speeds. That's a very juicy footless stop to start it off. Thank you for supporting me, Mr. nineT. This is where this shape of motorcycle, and especially sort of the ergonomics and riding position that I talked about before, really work well in my opinion, because the seat's not very high. It's easy to touch the ground. There's a nice big wide handlebar, which makes you feel like you're really in command and on top of the bike in environs like this. And of course, you know, I could wax poetic about BMW brochure material about how the engine provides a, I screwed that one up, provides a low center of gravity because of the boxer twin being down, whatever. It just is a very poised and balanced bike. It has a single plate dry clutch, which is very old technology. It's hydraulically actuated, which is slightly more modern technology. And that interfaces pretty well, I think. I find the clutch feel to be quite good. I find the throttle response to be quite good. The brakes are sharp. This is one of the areas where asking the question of why is it so expensive? Why is it a $16,000, $18,000, $20,000 motorcycle for being so simple and raw? And one of the things that you get is a BMW tax, and one of the things that you get is actual quality, in my opinion. Actual balance and feel, and a really high-touch sensory experience that's really satisfying in the cockpit. It does have 3 ride modes for what it's worth. I should mention that at some point. Rain and road and sport, I think. Such good footless stops. Love to see it. Anyway, the ride modes are, you know, sport is snappier and rain is softer, but I just find road mode to be the one that I like. And it's one of those bikes that I think it doesn't suit the nineT, in my opinion, to be ultimately versatile. It suits it to have a personality, so I tend to just leave it in one ride mode and do that. So yeah, all things considered, round town manners are quite good, I think. It's quiet, it's composed, it's handsome, it's accessible, it's poised, it's good. It's a good motorcycle around town, really like it. In typical BMW style, there is this cruise control rocker switch here that we can set at 34 miles an hour here. And I can push back onto the passenger seat just for a minute here. It is not hugely comfortable. The legroom is even tighter than the riding position. In fact, it's almost like sport bike tight. The good news for the passenger is that the person in front of them will be basically upright, and they'll probably be pretty comfortable. It's a fairly flat section seat. It is a 2-piece seat as opposed to the original 1-piece seat, but there's not a lot of step to the passenger seat, so they'll be peering over your shoulder if you're the rider. I don't think it's like an all-day comfortable passenger situation, but it's acceptable, and it feels like it's been thought out to some extent. I think BMW knows or is confident that the R9T rider is not prioritizing a passenger. And BMW could be right about that. I might have to agree. And in that case, you know, the passenger accommodations aren't that big a deal. Alrighty, dipping into the twisty road section. I've been looking forward to this on the nineT. To put it simply, this bike is probably going to handle better than you think. It is really lovely to send through a set of curves. It has this sort of aloof personality, right, where it seems too cool for school, and plus it's from BMW, which again, I mentioned before, people often associate with touring, luxury, comfort, stuff like that, not necessarily sporting ability, since this bike is so different than from BMW S1000s and that kind of thing. But it has surprisingly good sporting chops. It's really fun. The foot pegs drag eventually because it's kind of low. It's a little bit of a low bike, a little bit low in the rear, but by the time the foot pegs drag, you should probably slow down on a public road anyway. It's just amazingly kind of agile and light to the touch, considering it's supposed to look like a classic old heavy bike, and in some ways it is old and heavy. I think it's really, really enjoyable on a twisty road, and I would encourage you not to sleep on it. That said, I don't think it's quite as dynamic as the original few years of nineT from 2014 to 2020 or something like that. I just feel like that bike had a steeper rake. I think that bike ultimately was just kind of overbuilt. BMW gave itself a 90th birthday present. That's why it was called the nineT, and built this bike with the old engine, as I mentioned, and it gave it nice suspension and nice brakes and a sort of a pseudo steampunk attitude and look. And I think ultimately that bike ended up being purchased by a lot of people who had never purchased a motorcycle or a BMW before. And that was not what BMW had in mind, I don't think, when it made that bike. And so the fact that it was a little bit overbuilt was really nice for experienced riders who knew what they were doing, because they got on it and they were like, wow, the brakes are great, the suspension's great, the handling is just so surprisingly direct and agile and light and nice. And yet it has this sort of raw, wobbly, loud, stinky engine that is a piece that reminds you of the way it used to be, which was a good combo in my mind. So it's softened a little bit these days, even though it's still quite good and probably better than some people think. All right, red light, here we go. We can test these brakes, which are a little bit smaller and lower spec than they used to be, but they're still excellent in my mind. Quite sharp, quite good. Probably arguably better than they need to be, which is exactly how brakes should be. They are linked also, fair to mention. When you pull on the front brake lever, you get a little bit of rear pressure as well, which doesn't feel like much usually, but an interesting note. And it's pretty transparent when you use them. You don't want to feel that clumsiness in the system in any way, and I don't on this bike. All right, another red light, and we'll probably be here for a minute. Probably worth talking about the dash. I think the dash is lovely. I think it's nice. Just two big round gauges, speedo here, tacho here. And there's gear position indicator over here. See, we're in neutral, and we're in road mode, which I can cycle through here if I wanted to go to dynamic, excuse me, not sport, but dynamic, road, rain. I like road. And then over here you got, it's showing temp now, but you can also see tire pressure, you can see voltage from the battery, oil temp, average speed on this trip, average fuel mileage, this trip, total mileage. You go to a setup menu, you can see that I'm late for work. You can see how warm or cold it is outside. What we cannot see is a fuel gauge, which is a little bit of a miss in my mind. And while we're on the topic of misses, I don't like how there's a delay in the needle. Watch. When I twist the grip here, watch how see the delay there? Why is there a delay, BMW? Why? It doesn't really matter that much, but if this were like a cheap Chinese bike or something like that, I'd be like, come on, get it together. Premium brands don't do that. And then BMW's got to go and do it and make me look like a fool. I don't know why. It's a whiff of lack of quality that I don't like. I don't know why there's a delay between the grip and the tachometer. It's not like it's a sport bike. It's not like I need it to be ultra responsive. I just don't like that the refresh rate's slow. Why? Perfect time for a green light. Off we go, everybody. Well, we've gotten to the point of the ride where I talk about whether or not the bike is worth it just for the engine. And I would say yes, not because this engine is ultra fast or ultra special or ultra characterful. It's not, but it is special. It is the only place that you can buy this engine now. I'm a little bit of a BMW lover. I like the BMW heritage. I like the style. I like the way BMW builds bikes. So it's a double-edged sword, because should you buy this bike just for the engine? No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't just buy this bike for the engine. But if you did buy this bike just for the engine, that would be fair, because you could make a strong case for, say, Triumph's Speed Twin 1200, which has a lot of the same character as this machine, as far as the way that it looks and the way that it feels and the way that it handles, how much it weighs, how much it costs, which is a little bit less. But it does not have a boxer twin, because it's a Triumph. It has a parallel twin, and that engine is lovely for a bunch of other reasons. But this engine is unique, and that is worth talking about, I think, and worth considering. All right, nearing the end of the ride here, and we can circle back to those questions I asked at the beginning. Like, does this bike deliver on whatever expectations you have. And I can't say exactly what your expectations are, but I can give you some little bullet notes here. I think that one, yes, it does deliver a bit of a heritage feel. I grew up around BMWs from the 60s and 70s, and it doesn't feel as old, antiquated, as slow, as kind of clattery and loud as those bikes do, but it does feel like, you know, an older BMW, and that's kind of what you want when you're riding around on something that looks like a little bit older BMW. So I think that's a good thing. What about the bad things that you get with a bike that's supposed to look and feel old? Well, 6,000 mile valve check intervals on this bike, which is kind of crazy to me that, you know, BMW wouldn't have tried to update that a little bit, maybe. Just, I mean, a new Ducati Monster will go 18,000 miles before it needs its valves checked. So by the time the nineT rider has done 3 valve checks, it'll be the first time a Monster rider has. It just seems like weird, doesn't it? That seems a little bit backwards. Anyway, those are just 2 examples, one good and one bad. And I can't tell you what you like, you know? For some people, they might think, man, yeah, 6,000 mile valve checks, whatever, I don't care, I don't ride that much, or I'll do that myself, or I don't care about the expense or whatever, I just want the bike that looks like that and feels like that. And that's a totally fair answer. And if you think that's not acceptable, I don't want to have a transmission that feels a little bit old, I don't want to have, you know, some of the compromises that you make to have a bike like this and still pay a premium cost, and that would be fair too. I still think, even though the R12 nineT has softened its edges and become more refined and a little bit less raw and a little bit less maybe kind of precise and direct than the original nineT that came out in 2014, I still think it's a little slice of motorcycling bliss. I really like the bike. I think the feel is nice. I appreciate that the componentry is good, and it feels high quality. It's a bike that I really enjoy, and I'm thankful exists. All right, so this engine practically used to be in the big GS, so let's try to see what happens when we ride down a dirt road. Should be very comfortable with this, right? Well, first of all, I'm going to try dynamic mode, because the traction control should react a little differently in dynamic mode. Whoa. Yikes. Man, it's really aggressive. That's more than I was expecting. Let's try rain mode. See if it's more gentle. Not really. Wow. Interesting. Okay. Well, now I'm going to come to, I don't even think I have to come to a stop. I think I can just hold down this button over here. This little orange light will illuminate, and that means that TC is off. Rap, 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 rap. We're kicking up dust, everybody. ABS is also quite aggressive in the dirt. Okay, well, that was a little different experience than I was expecting. And it does bring up an interesting point about the traction control, because I did spin the tire on this thing on the pavement one cold morning when I was leaving my house, and it spun more than I was expecting. And that little traction control test kind of makes me think that there wasn't an anomaly. All right, let's try Wheelie. Second gear, 100 horsepower, should be able to do wheelie in second gear, yeah. Oh. Dropped it down kind of harsh. I didn't kick the quick shifter quite right. But yeah, we'll definitely do wheelies. I found that BMW Boxer Twins are not always the best for wheelies because of the longitudinal crankshaft, and it twists this way, which makes the bike feel a little funny sometimes with the front wheels in the air. But certainly has enough horsepower and enough chutzpah to get a little wheelie out of it, which, well, is just another reason that I like the nineT. All right, now we see if we can back it in, everybody. Can we back it in? Ah, ooh. Well, you can't really manually shut off ABS, so there's no real backing it in on the nineT. And it's not really that kind of bike anyway. It's not, you know, it's like a little bit rowdy and raw if you prod it, but ultimately it's not a supermoto, let's be honest. Let's try one more time though. Yeah, ABS just brings it back in line quite quickly. Let's see, we got TC off. Let's see if we can get a little slide here. No. Tires are warm and they're grippy. A little too much trailer trash around here to do an actual U-turn test, so we're gonna have to do a mock. We're gonna line up on this line here. We're gonna go full lock left, feet up. Come on. Oh yeah, well within 2. That's nice. It's got good low speed manners. It really does. And it's just about a 500-pound bike, but it feels good. Yeah, I think it's just low and poised enough that it feels good. Yeah, I don't think this one's as loud as the previous one. I feel like the other one was louder. I love that little snort though. It's great. And I like that it kind of twists and rocks back and forth a little bit when the crank twists. It's a little bit comical, but it's like this bike is supposed to, if anything, it could be more raw and more silly and less accommodating, I think. Not that I'm recommending, you know, putting straight pipes on every bike, but I do think if it was a little bit louder, I think that's what I would do if I owned one, but I don't know. All right, time for some Instagram questions. Let's see what you all have to say / ask about this bike. We'll start with Oh Hi Josh, who says, looks like this is one of those bikes that can almost double in price with options. Definitely true. What do you think is the most ideal spec and would be worth it? Would it be worth it? That's a good question, and I never really drilled down on price, but I just pulled it up here. I'm going to pull up the spec sheet for this bike. MSRP is $16,295. Technically, that's the base price. But most bikes on US showrooms, and probably most showrooms in general, will have the Select package, which includes the hill hold control, the quick shifter, heated grips, cruise control, and Bluetooth connectivity to the dash. This bike also has TPMS, which is $275, and the Adaptive Headlight Pro, which is $245, for a grand total, drumroll please, of $19,359. So most bikes, I think, are going to be around that $18,500, $19,000 mark on showroom floors, is my prediction / guess. And I think that's what you want. I mean, for me, I love the heated grips, love cruise control. Is that worth $1,500, Zach? Ooh, good question. Anyway, so those are my brief thoughts on the pricing. Is it a little bit overpriced? Sure, you can complain about that if you want, but is it a nice bike? Yeah, and if you want it, I think that you're going to want some of those luxury features as well, which you're probably going to find on showroom floors anyway. Next few questions here are to do with comparisons to other bikes like it. Norman Goddamn says his favorite retro standard bike has been the Honda CB1100. How does this compare? This is a little rowdier, a little bit more premium in my mind. The CB1100 has been very calm and cool and collected. Great looking bike, works well, very, very tame and calm. This is sportier and has a little bit more pizzazz to it. Next question is from Nicholas Dasco, who says, does the level of finish and the level of farkles, as in functional sparkles or features, justify the price premium over a Triumph Speed Twin? Good question. And I think if I'm being really just robot objective, Speed Twin, great bike, delivers a lot of the same feels and isn't as expensive. And I think it's a great value. I love the Speed Twin 1200. But these bikes are all about what you want. If you want a BMW Boxer, if you want a certain style, if you want some aspect of it, then I think it's worth it, frankly, because that's what these bikes are about. Next question is from Jimbo14, who says, if you love a naked Boxer twin but enjoy the odd thrash in the hills, should you get this or the R1250R, which is the naked telescopic fork version of the up-spec engine, or the newer engine, I should say, the 1250 engine with the new intakes and the shift cam technology and all the new stuff. I think you'd be surprised how well this bike handles, Jimbo. I think if you love the naked Boxer twin but enjoy the odd thrash in the hills, this is the bike for you. That's my prediction. Okay, last couple questions here. This one comes in from JC in the BCC, who says, this is an air-cooled engine on a bike with a host of modern electronics. Does the experience ever feel discordant, or does it balance the old school experience with the convenience of modern life well? Get out of my head, JC. Holy smokes. Yes, I have not ranted about the quick shifter yet, but I'm going to right now. I don't think this bike works very well with a quick shifter. I don't think the transmission, the engine dynamic, I don't think it works. First to second is often really like a jolt. It's awkward. The downshifts work pretty well, and the shifting in general works better up higher in the gears in the transmission because the ratios are closer, and so there's less variance that the engine has to make between shifts. The point is, I don't like the quick shifter. You probably noticed I shifted with the clutch a lot on this bike because I use it sometimes, and it's a cool feature in general, but I don't think it works. So I think the bike and its character is great. I think some of the electronic features are a little bit discordant, JC and the BCC, and I appreciate you letting me rant about that quick shifter. Last question comes in from Grant239, who says, if the R18 is an elephant, so that's our BMW's big cruiser, and the S1000RR, the BMW sport bike, is a cheetah, which animal on the African savanna is the R12 nineT? Or Animal Cracker Box? This is a great question. I love this question. I don't have a good answer. What else can we say? I would say the big GS is probably the lion, right? Has to sort of like attack, and it's a predator to some extent. What is the R12? I'm really struggling here. I'm not sure. It's not fair to call it a hyena or like a gazelle. I'm going to say it's a baboon. They got baboons on the savannah. It's playful. It's a little bit cagey. It's maybe thinking some things that you're not expecting. Every time I've interacted with baboons in the wild, which has not been very many times, I've always thought, what an interesting animal. And I'd like to get closer, except I'm not sure that I trust that it's that it has the best intentions in mind. It's not unpredictable and savage in the way that a baboon can be, I should say. It is maybe deeper and more meaningful and interesting and dynamic experience than you first give it credit for when you see it. And I don't really know if that relates it to a baboon very well, but I'm going with baboon for the final answer there. Thank you for all your questions. There's a lot of great ones in this one. I really appreciate it so much. Bear with me just a little longer and we'll put this sucker on the Daily Rider leaderboard.
Okay, McDokey, everybody. Here we are inside RevZilla West at the Daily Rider leaderboard. We have a BMW R12 nineT. I almost put a $sign on there because the spec of this bike it's touching up against 20 grand. 20 grand is usually the barrier of entry to get a pricey emblem, you know? Base price is 16 and change, so, you know, I'll let it slide. It's an expensive bike, though. Feels expensive, is expensive. Let's see, what else? There's some other stuff I didn't talk about. Optional dash with a little TFT that you can get. Probably some other stuff too. This is where I tell you can click in the link in the description, go to my article. There's more pictures, specifications, data, opinions, words. Read, enjoy, share, all that stuff. Okay, more to the point though. Where does the BMW R12 nineT land on the 2024 Daily Rider leaderboard? Last bike to go on the 2024 board, by the way. And it's an interesting one because it's a premium, nice, powerful, good, usable, characterful motorcycle. So we got a lot to compare it to here. You could start with the Triumph Scrambler 1200X. It's a bike I like a lot. Of course, isn't quite the Triumph Modern Classic that would match up to the R12 nineT. That'd be more like a Speed Twin 1200 as we talked about, but that's a good baseline there. What else we got up here? Well, there's another BMW F900 GS. I would probably rather have an R12 nineT than an F900 GS, but it's pretty hard to argue against the capability and versatility of the F900 GS. That's a pretty darn good bike. So I don't think the R12 nineT is gonna knock that one off the post. So we're gonna be down in here somewhere. Ducati Monster SP. Good motorcycle, powerful, fast, works well, pretty comfortable. Z900 SE, it's very good, very competent, works really well, but kind of left me cold. You know, sitting next to each other in my garage, I'm taking the nineT instead of the Z900 99 times out of 100 because I just like the premium feel of it and I like the sort of character of the engine and all that jazz. I really appreciate that stuff, even though the Z900 is like performance-wise and comfort-wise, like it's in the noise, I think. Gosh, this is so hard. I'm gonna pick up the Magnet. That's what I do when I can't decide. The Monster SP, this is the bike that it compared. Like, you could argue it's better because it's like a little more premium, maybe a little bit more comfortable, maybe a little bit more regal, but you could argue that it's worse because the nineT is oddly more maintenance intensive and it's more expensive. I think, isn't it? How much is that Monster SP? Does anyone remember? I think it's less than a nineT somehow, which doesn't quite feel right. I often suffer from recency bias and I think that the bike that I just rode is great because I just had a lot of fun on it. But I think I'm gonna give the nod to the Monster SP. I think that bike would be sharper at a track day, though you could ride a nineT at a track day. I bet you'd have fun. But I'm gonna give it the nod. I'm gonna give it the nod, everybody. I'm going R12 nineT underneath Monster SP. And I would definitely, I like the nineT better than I like the Z900, even though practically the Z900 is quite a good motorcycle. Okie doke. Last bike of 2024 is on the board. I've covered a lot of bikes in 2024, by gosh. Thank you for sticking around for this ride and any others that you've enjoyed or tolerated over the year and years. I appreciate it very much. I guess one last shout out to click on the link in the description, read the article, see the photos, learn more about this bike and others. In the meantime, ride safe. See you next time.
Uh-oh, little cone dude got tipped over here. Let's just do a little good Samaritaning and put this guy back here so it's where it's supposed to be. And then we'll turn right and keep on our way.